Welcome back everyone, and it's time to go balls deep!
Woo! It's showtime!
Today we are covering part 2 to our My Hero Academia final arc theory, a balls deep theory. We covered part 1 last week, so if you want to be on the same page as the rest of the anime balls deep community, please watch it and come back to part 2 to understand everything. Now if you want to be a rebel and you don't want to watch part 1, this video won't make much sense to you.
That'll make no sense.
That's why it's so important to hit the notification button on the channel and smash that like button. That way YouTube won't make you miss these goddamn videos and you can keep supporting this channel. I'd really appreciate it if you can. But looking at the comments from the last video, everyone seems to agree with the premise with part 1 that the heroes will struggle against Shigaraki and will have to create some sort of resistance or counterattack since he is too powerful in the war.
Don't fuck with me! I have the power of God and anime on my side! Wait,
By the way, this video will contain spoilers of the Heroes Rising movie. You have been warned.
Spoiler warning!
So before we continue our explanation of how the My Hero Academia series will end from the last video, let's quickly go over what happened in chapter 274. In this chapter, it was confirmed that Shigaraki not only possesses the original All For One quirk, but he also has all the quirks that All For One gathered. Shigaraki expresses that all these quirks in him feel like he was born with them, which instantly explains how he shows proficiency with all these new powers. So far, we have seen Shigaraki use his Decay quirk, his super regeneration, air cannon, and some sort of super strength power. And let's not forget the search quirk, which was taken from Ragdoll. So if we can all remember, in chapter 89, the original All For One states that when he steals a quirk, he's actually doing it for Shigaraki's sake, since the doctor admitted in chapter 270 he knew that he would eventually be defeated. So he purposefully gave the original power to Shigaraki. Now if we look back at chapter 89, All For One could have easily stolen Best Genius's quirk if he wanted to, but he states, "Your strength is the product of endless training and a wealth of experience, but I don't need it because your quirk isn't one that would suit Tomura Shigaraki." This means Shigaraki having the search quirk was on purpose. All For One has admitted many times that he wants Shigaraki to be the symbol of terror that will face Deku that has one for all. In fact, he even proves he has this knowledge to All Might that he knows he entrusted one for all quirk to Deku. Moving on, in chapter 72, it explains the search quirk allows Ragdoll to observe and monitor up to 100 people at a time, including their location and weak points. So a question that we must all have as a community, since we all know All For One as a person only has a copy of his own quirk and he gave the original to Shigaraki, how did he place all these powers within him? Well, we were told he got the search quirk around chapter 83 in the forest training camp part, and shortly after in chapter 99 he fought All Might and went to prison, Tartarus, right? That means the doctor must have copied all the quirks All For One gathered, including search, and placed them in the Shigaraki experiment. That's why we see in chapter 260 the hundreds and hundreds of powers that were gathered by Dr. Saab. It's basically a bank of powers. Don't forget, Ragdoll was in a facility similar to the Nomu where her power was being stolen and copied. Coming back to chapter 274, as Endeavor pursues Shigaraki, he uses his Hell's Curtain to create a flame wall around it. However, Shigaraki just flies past it, regenerating from the damage done by the flames. Endeavor requests backup from anyone who has the ability to avoid touching the ground, so they aren't at risk from Shigaraki's decay. And of course, I'm thinking, oh my god, that's Deku's float, right? His quirk is about to be unlocked. This is foreshadowing of Deku mastering the float quirk next, as we all know it belonged to Shigaraki's grandma Nana Shimura. The float quirk will act as a slight counter to decay and can save lives. If Deku can utilize this quirk to help the heroes lift off the ground, the chances to fight and defeat Shigaraki will increase, because the decay quirk needs material to be passed on, as we saw in chapter 272. Now, during the interaction between Endeavor and Shigaraki, it's obvious that Shigaraki's mind is adjusting to his newfound power, but his inner thought and feeling is pushing him to take one for all and make it his own. More than likely, it's All For One driving this this instinct. It seems Shigaraki doesn't know that he cannot steal this quirk. However, All For One does know this information, so more than likely All For One wants to see the One For All vestiges to maybe speak to his younger brother again, or test if there is a chance to take the quirk due to All For One being in a new body with a new plan. However, more than likely One For All cannot be taken, and you're probably thinking, why Anime Balls Deep? Well, we know that One For All is a quirk that can be willingly transferred if the recipient ingests a sample of the predecessor's DNA from blood or strand of hair or something else. However, the key point is that the current possessor of the quirk must willingly choose to transfer the quirk. The power is said that it cannot be taken by force, making One For All the destined quirk to face against All For One without the fear of it being stolen. Some evidence for this is in chapter 59, where Deku presumed Stain will gain One For All for licking his blood, but All Might clarifies that the quirk can only be transferred if the user of the quirk wills it themselves. There is also the fact of One For All being its own willing agent having a free will. What this means is that One For All seems to be consciously choosing and activating certain parts of the quirk to the user. This is showcased with Deku. In chapter 193, the first One For All user interacted and informed Deku about the quirk itself. Deku was also given access to Black Whip quirk, which was stockpiled within One For All. Deku even admits this to Bakugo and All Might, that it seems as though the users are trying to communicate to him and they decide when he unlocks their power at a certain given moment. Black Whip was only activated because Deku used it with the innate purpose of what it was in the past, which was to capture people. So the dude decided to give it to him as he has passed the singularities, such as the first One For All users stating this to him, that you can master all the quirks, we have chosen you, bruv. Another case of One For All acting on its own, showing its sentient will, was in the My Hero Academia movie Heroes Rising. When Deku gave his quirk to Bakugo, the quirk transference stopped once the boys defeated Nine. The reasoning given by All Might was that Bakugo fell unconscious, therefore not completing the transfer. However, he himself was unsure on why this happened. However, logically speaking, when Deku received the quirk, Deku's transference was instant when he ate All Might's hair. Deku even fell asleep the same night, but the transference didn't stop at that point of time. More than likely, One For All and the users being sentient will decide to stay with Deku, and understood what he was trying to achieve in the movie when he gave his quirk to Bakugo. Another piece of evidence is when we go to My Hero Academia Vigilante manga in chapter 55 page 7. All Might himself explains how there is a pushing force by his own quirk One For All that are telling him to save those in need, go save the people. This just showcases the moral dichotomy once again and the parallels between the two sides of good and evil, as both All For One and One For All are quirks that are interlinked and sentient. Look at chapter 274. All For One also asks Shigaraki with a will to go and steal One For All for him and is controlling him in some way. Let's not forget, in chapter 184, All For One confirms the will of his quirk, as he admits he knows what he is doing is not right, but he states, "When I see a good quirk, I just need to have it. Definitely a bad habit of mine. I'd love to return Ragdoll's quirk, but that would involve using my own power." Since One For All is the best quirk of all, that would explain another reason why Shigaraki also has this will. So now we have confirmed that both quirks have a sentient will, and All For One's brother wants to stop his tyranny to create peace. This logic would then explain why All For One did not steal the quirk against previous One For All users for over 150 years. However, All Might does explain in chapter 257 that every previous user passed it on before dying by his hands. It's highly likely All For One tried to steal the quirk from a previous One For All user, but over time he realized that embers were always passed on, so he wanted to do this too. A more comparable situation is when Nines, when he analyzes Deku's quirk and tries to steal it for himself, he discovers that he's unable to take it. With that in mind, it begs the question whether One For All can be stolen by someone with a quirk stealing ability. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and make sure to smash that like button. Anyway, moving on, All Might states in chapter 257 that All For One his whole life has been obsessed with the quirk One For All. He describes that when he was powerful, it was an age when evil wielded a degree of power that's hard for us to even imagine. He went around crushing anyone that was strong, and there was nobody that could defy his malice and control. Every single user of One For All died young, and they weren't the chosen ones. All they could do was entrust the quirk to the next person, hoping for prosperity. And we know this is a goddamn shonen, so that means a 16-year-old green-haired simp-looking ass boy is now the chosen and destined one. Future mate, since at the end of the day he is a narcissist and may want to become the Demon King himself and the symbol of terror. A person like All For One manipulates the outcome of situations, making the manipulated feel like they are in control, when in reality he is the one pulling the strings. Even in chapter 94, when All For One first goes to prison, in his dialogue he rants how All Might messed up, man, because Shigaraki losing him as a mentor will only allow him to be more independent and stronger. All For One predicted exactly what Shigaraki would feel and do in return. This level of manipulation highlights that All For One is playing everything like a chess game. Even his predicament of being locked up in the most secure prison, Tartarus, is in All For One's control, because in chapter 116, during All For One's conversation with All Might, he indicates that he will escape eventually when All Might says, well, you're in prison, what are you gonna do? And then All For One just says, bruh, believe what you want, fam. Believe what you want. You think I'm in prison? I don't care, bruh. Now, when we look at chapter 209, All For One even admits all the nostalgia he is experiencing, and it's allowing him to hear his little brother's voice somehow. So this only proves even more that Shigaraki should be able to interact with Nana Shimura, and maybe he intends to reunite with the one person he actually cared for, to show him that he has become the Demon King and his ideals he saw when they were kids have been met. Anyway, moving on, when we go back to chapter 274, Deku and Bakugo realize that Shigaraki is after his quirk, so they proceed to move away from the civilian, knowing that Shigaraki will chase after Deku using his search power. It is very likely that Horikoshi, the creator of the show, he will make Shoto Todoroki and Uraraka join Bakugo and Deku's meeting with Shigaraki, because Uraraka will advise Deku on the best way to use the float quirk once he unlocks it, since gravity is such a similar power. This will help move the narrative forward, as well as their love ship. I mean, let's not forget, she is also the one that originally helped Deku when he unlocked the Black Whip, and with her quick wittiness allowed him to harness that power. At the end of the day, Uraraka must have some sort of idea that Deku is lying when he says he forgot something, and she will find out the truth that he has one for all, being part of the secret. Shoto Todoroki could join the fight because in chapter 273, Shigaraki has told Gigan Tamakia to gather all the League of Villains members to him. This will mean he will finally meet Darby again, and the truth about the Todoroki family arc will finally be uncovered. Since Gigan Tamakia has the ability to smell the scent of his master, and he has been told to come to Shigaraki, he will be joining the battle with them quite soon. It won't matter that Deku says in chapter 274 that he will go to an isolated situation where no one else is, because he will eventually find them. Let's not forget that Darby's #1 aim is to kill his father, as he idolizes Stain's outlook on heroes, since he is actually Toyo Todoroki. He hates the abuse he received as a child from Endeavor, who in his eyes is a fake ass hero. This will intertwine all the stories together, as Horikoshi admits that this is one of his intentions with My Hero Academia. Now, on a side note, if you want to know more about Darby being the missing member Toyo Todoroki from Endeavor's family situation, then I highly suggest you check out our series of videos we have done covering it. The community pretty much says it's a fact at this point. The video will be linked in the pinned comment. Now, one concept of how My Hero Academia will end could be similar to how the Heroes Rising movie worked out. When the creator of My Hero Academia was mentioned in regards to the movie, the staff working on the film admit that elements from the last chapter of the My Hero Academia manga were used. Nagasaki responded by saying, yes, we did use an element that was originally planned in the manga's last battle, and used it towards the end of the movie. When we discussed the ending elements of the story, we asked Horikoshi sensei, isn't this element what you had originally planned to use in the manga? However, Horikoshi sensei gave us the green light to use it. In fact, he probably wanted us to use it and give us his support. From that, we were able to carry out the story and decide on various elements. Horikoshi sensei even told us, I'll create an even better ending anyway, so it's all good. What they are referring to here is the fact that all the kids we know join up as a team against Nines. Bakugo and Deku form a partnership and share the one for all quirk quirk to eventually defeat 9. So if we connect all of these dots, fam, ultimately the series could end with One for All being shared between Deku and his friends and all the heroes, therefore fulfilling the metaphor of what the quirk actually means. One for all, the power for all to share to overcome evil. Horikoshi, the creator of the manga, admits that he consciously has the ending of My Hero Academia in mind whilst creating developments of each and every character in the show, because he knows for a fact that in the ending everyone's stories will intertwine together in the last part. So in the manga, if everyone gains One for All for a moment, it will fulfill another moral philosophy that all heroes can go plus ultra and help fulfill the ideal role of what All Might created, the symbol of peace that created a society that All for One despises so much. This will also solve the issue of the quirk singularity, as the singularity states that the quirk is too powerful for the user to control. But if One for All is shared, then the burden to bear the quirk is also shared, meaning that the quirk can be used to its full capacity as it will be shared amongst everyone. Just look how overpowered Bakugo got in the movie. Using 100% full cow, he was melting rock as if the quirk was lava, for God's sake, fam. Now if all the kids and heroes receive this buff in the final fight to assist Deku, they will be absolutely broken and can finally go against Shigaraki's overwhelming advantage he currently has. Let's not forget that after One for All is transferred to a recipient, the previous One for All user, which would be Deku, can still use the leftover embers of One for All and thus can still access the power. Plus, the quirk is sentient, so it would just come back to him like it did in the movie since it knows his intentions. And again, remember, this is just a theory. Horikoshi gave this idea for the movie. He can use it again. He did say at the end of the day he would just make it better in the manga, but we still need that time skip, fam. At the end of the day, I don't see how the manga is ending in this arc, because Shigaraki will now face Deku and Bakugo at the moment, but we can all agree that Deku still needs to learn the other 3 quirks, and Deku also needs to find out who the hell were the second and third users of One for All, since All Might could not find out about this mystery even in chapter 257. So there is a few plot holes here and there that need to be fulfilled, so there must be some sort of time skip after this fight. At the end of the day, the plot device that is being used here, Deku will unlock the flow against Shigaraki and interact with Nana. This is a balls deep prediction quirk coming true, baby. I actually stated this theory 4 months ago, but I can't believe it's actually coming true. It's absolutely insane. Anyway guys, that's just a theory, a anime